and welcome, folks, to this meeting of Troy City Council. It is Monday, September 19th, 2022. My name is William Lutz, President of Council. We'll begin our meeting with the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance given by Mrs. Snee this evening. Please stand.
Please join me in prayer. Gracious God, I pray that you bless those who are at this meeting tonight. Give us the courage to speak out when needed and the wisdom to listen patiently when necessary. Bless our city and let us all be guided by a spirit of community. We pray for all those who serve to protect our nation and our city and those who provide public service every day. May we all use our talents to make a difference in the world. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That was a great invocation. Thank you, Mrs. Snee. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Snee.
Here.
Mr. Phillips.
Present.
Mr. Twist.
Here.
Mr. Rozell.
Here.
Mr. Schilling.
Present.
Mrs. Marshall.
Here.
Mr. Whitten.
Here.
Mr. Siebert.
Here.
Mr. Pierce.
Present.
All members are present.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read a summary of the minutes of the last meeting of Troy City Council?
Minutes of Council, September 6, 2022. Committee reports. Community and Economic Development Committee recommended ordinance number 04222 be approved, which provides for amendments to the zoning code. Committee recommended ordinance number 044-2022 be adopted, which is a rezoning. Committee recommended legislation be prepared to vacate an easement on part of Outlot 5. Community Partnerships Committee recommended that an agreement be authorized with Pink Ribbon Girls for an event on October 8. Law and Ordinance Committee reported regarding notice of transfer or new D1 liquor permits. Resolution number R59-2022, authorizing tax levies, first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 042-2022, amending sections of the zoning code, was given for third reading and adopted. Ordinance number 044-2022, changing a zoning of in-lot 8386 to a planned development industrial, was given third reading and was adopted. Ordinance number 046-2022, establish a one Ohio opioid settlement fund, was given first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 047-2022, vacating an easement on part of Outlot 5, first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 048-2022, authorizing agreement with Pink Ribbon Girls, was given first reading and was adopted. There was a presentation regarding a new child advocacy center. Following various comments, council adjourned at 7:45 p.m.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. How does council wish to dispose of the minutes this evening?
Move to approve.
Second.
It's been moved to approve the minutes by Mr. Rozell, seconded by Mr. Siebert. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Phillips.
Yes.
Mr. Twist.
Yes.
Mr. Rozell.
Yes.
Mr. Schilling.
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall.
Yes.
Mr. Whitten.
Yes.
Mr. Siebert.
Yes.
Mr. Pierce.
Yes.
Mrs. Snee.
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. We move on to our committee reports for the evening. We have 6 reports this evening. The first 2 reports are from the Community and Economic Development Committee with Mr. Schilling.
Thank you, Mr. Lutz. The summary report, this committee met on September 12th to consider recommending amending Chapter 1307 of the codified ordinances regarding the property maintenance code, including adding a provision for certain subsequent violations. The last code update was to approve the 2012 code addition. It is a recommendation of the committee that legislation be prepared to amend Chapter 1307 of the codified ordinances regarding adopting the latest published edition of the International Property Maintenance Code, IPMC, as the Property Maintenance and Housing Code of the City of Troy, including to provide amendments to the code that particularly reference Troy. And this was respectfully submitted by Mr. Pierce, Mrs. Snee, and myself as Chairman, Jeff Schilling.
Thank you, Mr. Schilling. Are there any comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, Mr. Schilling, please continue.
Okay. This committee met again on September 12th to consider the recommendation of the Troy Planning Commission that the final plat of Section 9 of the Fox Harbor subdivision be approved. Section 9 is in general accordance with the preliminary plan. It is a recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared accepting the final plat of Section 9 of the Fox Harbor subdivision as presented, including the dedication of right-of-way. As requested by staff, legislation will not be presented until the developer executes the standard escrow agreement. And again, this was respectfully submitted by Mr. Pierce, Mrs. Snee, and myself, Jeff Schilling, as chair.
Thank you, Mr. Schilling. Are there any comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, we'll move to the Finance Committee and Mr. Sievert.
Thank you, Mr. President. This committee met on September 12 to consider water and sewer rates for the next 5-year period. The proposed rates would provide the fund stability recommended by the city auditor and fund necessary and mandated projects. The rates recommended continue to keep the sewer fees paid by Troy customers well under the average of the rate of 63 neighboring political subdivisions. Further, no rate adjustment is being proposed for the water fund for the next 5-year period. It is a recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared authorizing adjustments to the sewer rate of 5% for each year 2023 through 2027, but that there be no increase to water rates at this time. Respectfully submitted, Mr. Phillips, Mr. Rozell, and myself as chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Sievert. Are there any comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, we'll move on to the Safety and Health Committee and Mr. Twist.
Thank you, Mr. President. This committee met on September 12th to consider the renewal of the agreement with Concord and Staunton Townships for fire and EMS services, and renewal of the agreement with Lost Creek Township for EMS services to a portion of that township. The current agreements expire on December 31st. The annual payments are shown for each township in the charts at the end of the detailed report and have been approved by the respective township trustees. It is the recommendation of the committee that legislation be prepared based on the amounts shown in the charts below to authorize the Director of Public Service and Safety to enter into an agreement with Concord Township and Staunton Township for the City of Troy providing fire and EMS services for the years 2023 through 2027. Authorize the Director of Public Service and Safety to enter into an agreement with Lost Creek Township for the City of Troy providing EMS services to an area of the township for years 2023 through 2027. That's respectfully submitted by Christy Marshall, Jeffrey Whitten, and myself as Chair, Bill Twist.
Thank you, Mr. Twist. Are there any comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, our last two reports are with the Streets and Sidewalks Committee, and Mr. Phillips.
Thank you, sir. The Streets and Sidewalks Committee met on September 12 to consider Troy continuing to participate in ODOT's bridge inspection program. ODOT hires a consultant to perform the annual inspections and provide the reports. Participating in the program will save staff time in inspecting 13 bridges annually and provide another entity confirming the city's analysis of the bridge work that may be needed. The inspection services are at no cost to the city. This committee does recommend that the consent legislation provided by ODOT for Troy to participate in the bridge inspection program be approved. Based on the ODOT request, we do support legislation being presented as an emergency, and this is respectfully submitted by Mr. Pierce, Mrs. Snee, and myself as chair.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Are there any comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, Mr. Phillips, you can continue.
Also on September 12th, the committee met to consider the recommendation of the Troy Planning Commission that an unimproved 14-foot alley of record between 725 West Franklin Street, which is in Lot 826, and 735 West Franklin Street, which is part of Outlot 91, be vacated as petitioned by the abutting property owners. The city has no reason to retain this alley of record, and it is the recommendation of this committee, which we do support the recommendation of the Troy Planning Commission, and further recommends that legislation be prepared vacating the unimproved 14-foot alley of record between 725 West Franklin Street of in-lot 826 and 735 West Franklin Street, part of Outlot 91. And this is respectfully submitted by Mr. Pierce, Mrs. Snee, and myself as chair.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Are there any comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, we go to citizen comments on items for the agenda. We have 4 resolutions and 3 ordinances on our agenda this evening. If you wish to speak on any of those items, you're invited to come to the lectern, give your name and address. You have 2 minutes to address council. Mr. Kerber is our timekeeper this evening. Seeing no one wishing to come forward, we'll move on to resolutions. We'll ask Mrs. Knight to read the first resolution of the evening, Resolution R60, 2022.
Resolution number R60, 2022. Resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to enter into an agreement with Concord Township Board of Trustees. This will be for an agreement for 5 years. This is the first reading.
Second.
It has been moved to suspend the 3 reading rule by Mr. Whidden, seconded by Mr. Phillips. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes. Move to adopt.
Second.
The 3 reading rule has been suspended. It's been moved to adopt the resolution by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Twist. Are there any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the next resolution of the evening, Resolution R61, 2022?
Resolution number R61, 2022, resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to enter into an agreement with the Staunton Township Board of Trustees. This is for fire and emergency medical services for the township for the coming 5 years. First reading.
Move to suspend.
Second.
It has been moved to suspend the 3 reading rule by Mr. Schilling, seconded by Mr. Whidden. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
The 3 reading rule has been suspended. It's been moved to adopt the resolution by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Sievert. Are there any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the next resolution of the evening, Resolution R62, 2022?
Resolution number R62, 2022. Resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to enter an agreement with the Lost Creek Township Board of Trustees. This is for emergency medical services for the next 5 years. First reading.
Move to suspend. Second. It has been moved to suspend the 3 reading rule by Mr. Whidden, seconded by Mr. Pierce. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
The 3 reading rule has been suspended. It has been moved to adopt the resolution by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mrs. Snee. Are there any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the next resolution of the evening, Resolution R63, 2022?
Resolution number R63, 2022, a resolution authorizing consent and cooperation with the Ohio Department of Transportation for the Bridge Inspection Program and declaring an emergency. This program is provided by ODOT at no cost to the city. This is a continuing program. This is the first reading.
Move to suspend.
Second.
It has been moved to suspend the 3 reading rule by Mr. Rozell and seconded by Mr. Twist. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Move for adoption.
Second.
It has been moved to adopt the resolution by Mr. Phillips and seconded by Mr. Siebert. The three reading rule has been suspended. Are there any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. We move on to ordinances now. And we'll ask Mrs. Knight to please read the first ordinance of the evening, Ordinance 049, 2022.
Ordinance number 049, 2022, an ordinance vacating a 14-foot wide unimproved alley between in-lot 826 and part of outlot 91 in the city of Troy. This is also known as between 725 and 735 West Franklin Street. Has been petitioned by both abutting property owners, has been recommended for approval by the Troy Planning Commission. First reading.
Move for suspension.
Second.
It has been moved to suspend the three reading rule by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Whidden. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
The three reading rule has been suspended. It is moved to adopt the ordinance by Mr. Twist, seconded by Mr. Phillips. Are there any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the next ordinance of the evening, Ordinance 050, 2022.
Ordinance number 050, 2022. An ordinance amending sections 915.10C of the codified ordinances of the city of Troy, Ohio, relating to sewer rates. This will increase the sewer rates for a 5-year period at 5% per year. This is the first reading.
Move to suspend.
Second.
It has been moved to suspend the three reading rule by Mr. Sievert, seconded by Mrs. Snead. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
No.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
The three reading rule has been suspended. It has been moved to adopt the ordinance by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Sievert. Are there any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
No.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the last ordinance of the evening, Ordinance 051, 2022?
Ordinance number 051, 2022. Ordinance repealing Chapter 1307 of the codified ordinances of the city of Troy, Ohio, and enacting new Chapter 1307 of the codified ordinances of the city of Troy, Ohio, regarding the International Property Maintenance Code. This basically updates the code to the 2021 edition. This is the first reading.
Move for suspension.
Second.
It has been moved to suspend the three reading rule by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Schilling. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling.
Yes.
Move for adoption.
Second.
The three reading rule has been suspended. It has been moved to adopt the ordinance by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Sievert. Are there any final comments or questions? Mr. Schilling.
Thank you. I have a question, Mr. Kerber. On this particular recommendation, in committee meeting, we had talked about, we had been asked by staff to, as amendments come through on this particular, from the IPMC, that staff would be allowed to add those amendments to the code without approval of council, and we sort of agreed to that with the idea that we would be notified, and I think we've received something either from you or from Mrs. Knight saying that we really can't do that, that each amendment has to be approved by council.
That is certainly the best practice, and because some of the, with it being a model code, sometimes it's a one-size-fits-all, and, the important thing is that we make sure that it's the right fit for the city as well, and, for having an ordinance that has criminal penalty section on it, we don't want to just have updates without taking a look at those.
Okay, so my question is, we talk about including to provide amendments to the code, particularly referencing Troy. That is talking about the code as we're adopting today, not the potential for amendments in the future. Is that how you would understand that?
That is correct.
Okay, I appreciate your information on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kerber. Did you get your question answered, Mr.
I did.
Kerber?
I thank Mr. Kerber for that.
Any further comments or questions? We have a standing motion. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Whidden.
Yes.
Mr. Sievert.
Yes.
Mr. Pierce.
Yes.
Mrs. Snead.
Yes.
Mr. Phillips.
Yes.
Mr. Twist.
Yes.
Mr. Rozell.
Yes.
Mr. Schilling.
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall.
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. We move on to communications and announcements. Mrs. Knight, do we have any this evening?
We do not.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Moving on to comments of officials. Mayor Oda.
I'll just say a couple things since Patrick isn't here tonight. I want to congratulate Jason Stormer on his promotion to Operations Manager at Hobart Arena. Phil Knoll retired. And so congratulations to him. Also, CSX was not able to start the work that had been anticipated today. Hold your applause. Hold your applause. We do not know. They thought maybe Thursday they would be starting, but we'll see.
Okay.
You'll see them when you see them. Other than that, we hosted a Ukrainian mayor in Troy today, had a wonderful visit with him, and just very honored to show him around Troy. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Moving on to Director of Law, Mr. Kerber.
I have no comments this evening. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Kerber. City Auditor, Mr. Frigge.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have nothing at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Frigge. The only thing I would add is Patrick would make sure that we know that the first round of leaf collection, I believe, is October 17th.
And when trick or treat is?
And trick or treat is 27th. There we go.
6 to 8.
6 to 8. Rain or shine. Moving on to comments of council. Any council members have any comments this evening? Seeing none. Any staff members have any comments this evening? Seeing none, we'll go on to audience comments. If you wish to address council on any topic, you're invited to come to the lectern, give your name and address. Take as much time as you wish to consume. Please come forward.
Situated here. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've come forward. Now what's my instructions?
Please give us your name and address.
So my name is Chris Hicks, and I live at 444 Woodward Court in Cincinnati, Ohio.
And before you begin, I'm fairly certain we all know the topic that you want to address. I want to make it very clear that this item is under investigation currently by the Department of Health. Council has been advised not to get into any back or forth discussions about this topic, but you are still free to say whatever you wish. So,
Okay.
Mr. Hicks, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, just before I say what I want to say about baby boxes, I just want to, again, I appreciate the way things are here. I mean, I come from a place where there's pretty hardcore politics going on all the time, and maybe it's happening here, I don't see it, but the thing that you have, they meet the, ask questions of the council member that I came to on Saturday is fantastic. You know, these meetings, I know it's a council meeting and you go through stuff quick, but fantastic. The place is beautiful. Mr. Sievert figured out who I was because my college roommate was a guy named Chuck Lowball, and I had put in one of the emails to you that my college roommate was from Troy but now lived in Hilton Head, and he put it together. Well, there's only, I guess, a few people from Troy that he knew that lived in Hilton Head. So, I mean, you have a beautiful town. We're hanging out with my neighbors yesterday around the swimming pool and telling them we got to go up to Troy. And then I got to convince some of them and remind them that you have Dora also so that they can feel comfortable. They want to come up here. So I want to talk about baby boxes. And I talked to Chief Simmons a little bit before the meeting. And I think good people want the right things for women and for babies. And I think those of you that met me on Saturday, I said, you know, if you don't want to like me, that's fine, but get to not like me in person, okay, not based on reputation. And so I appreciate that. I think we all care here about babies, women, some of the societal issues that we face. And so I want to just give I'm not going to give the hour back and forth we had on Saturday. I'm going to just give a few minutes, but I just want to give, you guys probably know it, but I didn't know all this stuff, and I'll tell you real quick how I got involved and about the history of Safe Haven. And before I did, I got involved because my township got a box, and I was confused as why there was no fundraising, and that's what caused me to start looking into things, and that's kind of led me down the path I'm on. But just a real quick Safe Haven history that people might not know is I believe in Ohio, somebody might know more exact than me, but it's existed for about 20 years. So Safe Haven has been legal for 20 years at any fire station, any police station, or any hospital. Okay, I believe it also applies if I handed a 30-day or under baby to a uniformed officer on the street. The law is that extensive. I found in my township and other places, not only had it never been promoted, but I don't believe our fire department or police department even had any procedures in place for what they would do if somebody showed up. It's never happened in my township that this has happened. So that's just a real quick history of Safe Haven. And I'm going to show some examples later, but it kind of makes you wonder, when whoever passed Safe Haven 20 years ago, why didn't they do something like have every fire station, police station, and I'll turn around so people can see it, and a hospital put a sign like this up on the wall? And this sign for people back here can see it, I'll hold it up. It says you can confidentially surrender your baby up to 30 days old at any police station, fire station, or hospital. Need help, call Help Me Grow at 1-800, I'll talk about that in a second, and closest hospital. And I didn't bring it in, but there's another version of this that I showed you guys at the meeting that's for an actual Safe Haven location. And says things like, on it, if you come up to a fire station, ring bell, get somebody, okay? You wonder, you hear these stories, and a lot of this is based on emotion and horrible stories that should never happen, but fortunately are actually very rare that they happen. You know, somebody left a baby outside the fire station, they froze to death. Well, did that fire station have a sign on it that said, if you're here to surrender a baby, ring bell? Did it have a bell? You know, did it have some way that somebody would know what to do? So what I found is that people outside of our area that have had Safe Haven, there's parts of the country that have had Safe Haven a lot longer than we have, is that they actually see Safe Haven as ultimately something they don't want to have happen. Safe Haven is a hook to raise awareness so that women get information prior to the need. So I started thinking about, what do you want to have happen? I don't know who has, you don't have to raise your hands, I'm going to ask this rhetorically, but you know, who has a daughter? I have one kid, a son. I know your fire chief has one as well, from talking to him before the meeting. But what do we want to have happen? If I had a daughter, okay, I don't have a daughter, but frankly, I think I can comprehend this, and she was in a unplanned pregnancy situation. I want it to be destigmatized that she comes forward, gets proper prenatal care, has a proper medical delivery, learns about all of her options. That, by the way, I'm very pro-life, so don't take that as meaning anything beyond pro-life. That she learns her options like open adoption. Okay, which I learned, I never knew this stuff because I never investigated that much till recently. But open adoption is the in vogue thing to do now, where there's still a connection between the birth mom and the baby. But to come forward, those are options like custody arrangements while she gets her life together. Custody arrangements like putting the baby legally with mom or grandma or a relative or in the foster program with an intent to, when she gets her life together, to come get her baby back. So I think that's what we would want to have happen. Come forward. What don't we want to have happen? Well, I'm going to actually use an example because I think at your meeting somebody mentioned this example, Skylar Richardson. How many people have heard of Skylar Richardson? So Skylar Richardson, I think, I've been digging, and I'm glad to have somebody correct me, but I'm looking, when's the last time that we had one of these really horrific abandonment type situations? And at least in this area, I think Skylar Richardson stands out. It can get confusing because a lot of times the court cases and the events are very far removed from each other, so when did it actually happen? So Skylar Richardson, I think, was in Warren County, and was a person that had, young woman, she's still somewhere, I wish her the best, had mental health issues, anorexia issues, bulimia issues, found out she was pregnant when her mom took her to get birth control, and I guess she only got informed because she was of a certain age, didn't tell anybody, ended up not getting any prenatal care, not coming forward, having a stillborn baby in her bedroom, and burying it in the backyard. So people sometimes bring up that case. Well, what about the Skylar Richardson case? So I think that's a good case to bring up, because it's the example of stigmatization and somebody not coming forward to get proper care. And that's not just baby care, it can be mental health care, other medical care. So what I have found, and the reason why I've gotten so passionate about this, is that there's a company, Safe Haven Baby Box. It's the sole provider of baby boxes. I think when the legislature introduced baby boxes, they thought that some manufacturer would make a baby box and they would sell it. Not that a company would effectively be a marketing company that's very out there, very high pressure, that is now monetized, Safe Haven, into a $10,000 a pop proposition, and has a goal of putting baby boxes in every firehouse, in every police station, to make millions of dollars from Ohio. If you know the history, the company has about 120 boxes, about 90 of them are all in Indiana. Okay, the rest are scattered. I think there's 7 in Ohio. There's a couple that have not been activated in Ohio. And I found that when I ask questions, I got demonized, attacked. There's in the handout that I gave you guys, she put out videos that I followed her to her bathroom, which is complete nonsense. Just absolutely really ridiculous, over-the-top lies. And I had never seen something like this. Somebody who's supposedly pro-life, the people I know, I have a very close state representative friend named Tom Brinkman, who is super pro-life. And I told him, Tom, I've never seen somebody that's pro-life that acts this way. Attacks and demonizes people for asking the most basic questions. So that's why I got involved, is because I think that in Ohio, we should fix this, but we should fix it right. And the first thing is not that we need to start spending millions of dollars across the state on baby boxes, but that we need to put signs on every fire station, police station, and hospital to raise safe haven awareness. We need to put signs on other places. And now my friends are giving me all kinds of ideas. They should be and where I live, they should be on municipal court. They should be at the jail. They should be in high schools. They should be everywhere to raise that awareness. Now, as it comes to your box, Councilman Sievert in the meeting, in the Meet the Council Member, or Ask Questions of the Council Member thing, asked me, what would you do? And as you might know, I went back to that station, to the station, and looked at it. It's a beautiful station. All your stuff here is unbelievably beautiful. I went back to that station and looked around. I filmed some stuff about all the things wrong with that box. And people might not realize the rules aren't just, you look at a rule like external, internal. Why does that matter? Who cares? Well, the point of external is supposed to be that a woman never has to enter a building to surrender a baby. That our act of going through the door into a building is an inhibitor to a woman in crisis surrendering a baby. That's why it says external. Why does the law say that there needs to be somebody there 24/7? The 9/11 alarm is supposed to be a backup fail-safe. It's supposed to be that when you're committing to a baby box, you're committing that if somebody puts a 30-day or younger newborn in that box, there is going to be somebody there to render immediate medical aid. That's why I think the boxes should start in hospitals, not in police stations and not in fire stations, so the baby gets right to where that immediate aid is available. So your box, I know the camera, and she's gonna, Miss Knight responded to something today and is gonna get me some video from there. It's like, well, there's a camera, but it doesn't pick up the door. But there is a camera right above where the door is coming into the fire station there. Okay, it's clearly inside. You go into a ventilated place with a phone on the wall. It's not outside, it's not external. Okay, it got there, got implied in the media, and I know people make mistakes, and it is what it is, but it got implied in the media last week that ODH had somehow given approval and then they retracted their approval. No, they don't. They base their approval on an attestation of a compliance form that is submitted, where you sign off on it, that says it's in compliance with the Ohio Revised Code and the Ohio Administrative Code. The internal-external, that's one of the most obvious. It's like 4 times in both the Revised Code and the Administrative Code that it has to be external, it has to be accessed from the outside of the building, so on and so forth. So there's issues with that box, and I happened to drive out the fire station too, because you asked me what did I think. I drove around that station, the one you have it at now, I think is a big problem because there's a parking lot around most of it, and it's visible. It doesn't provide anonymity or low visibility or privacy for somebody that was surrendering a baby. And I went out to fire station 2, which maybe the back of it or something would be a better location. But, really, why wouldn't you think about that it should be at the hospital? That it should be someplace where there's going to be an immediate care person there. So that's what I would do. That's what I would do is I'd say, can we move this to the hospital? I am not against baby boxes, okay? I think they should be at hospitals to start, and I think that we should have awareness to start on fire stations, police stations, and hospitals that don't have boxes, okay? And we should strive in every way we can to make sure that, especially in a post-Roe v. Wade world, that we are trying to make sure that women that get into an unplanned pregnancy situation get proper prenatal care, proper safe medical delivery, that they know their options, and they can act on those options. So I thank you guys for letting me talk, and I just want to, before I can finish, I want to point out that I gave, and if anybody in the audience wants one, I have like 10 extra copies. I don't have 10 extra copies, I have like 5 extra copies. I gave you this handout. And the first page of the handout, and I'm getting fancy, I just learned today how to do a QR code, which is super simple. So there's QR codes on there so that you can see what I think are the problems with the locations in right now, and some code references right now. And a QR code, and you can watch the little 10-minute video I did on Saturday out there pointing out, here's what I think's wrong here. One of the things in that video is the forms. That box inside of it has a private baby registry form. The Safe Haven Baby Box Company contract, I just got your records, so they're almost always the same, the contracts. They're always the same. If yours was different, it would be uniquely different from the other ones. The contract requires you to disclose information on the baby to Safe Haven Baby Box if there's a surrender. I don't even think that's probably legal, that it's getting disclosed to a third-party company. That gets used, then also they push for a private baby registry. They use that to contact parents and try to get babies used in fundraising. So if you go, there's a link on here on the last page, you can actually watch a video of babies getting used in fundraising events. Okay, I'd ask anybody to think about that. Think about the morals and ethics of using babies in fundraising events that have been surrendered in a box. Okay, I put this page in here that has the box, it's actually a picture of your box. And it has some concerns. I've shared other versions, but I cleaned it up because I looked more close at your box, okay, of what's involved. And then I noticed you put in the bag of materials on the wall. If you guys haven't noticed this, historically, Safe Haven Baby Boxes has a bag of materials inside the box. That's against the code. Why? Well, look at that bag. There can't be anything in the box that could be a choking, suffocation, or other hazard to a baby that gets put in that box. But they do it. You were doing it. Somebody probably getting nervous about somebody like me said, we better put it out on the wall, okay? So now it's on the wall. There's only one. I can't understand why Safe Haven Baby Box doesn't want there to be multiple copies so that a woman or a friend could take a copy of the materials with them and review them prior to making the decision of what to do. I mean, what kind of world is it that we wouldn't let the woman, the way it has been up until this bag, you're the first place in Ohio that puts the bag outside the box. That's a pro. But to think that the woman doesn't even get the materials in the box until they've mentally made the commitment decision to open that door. I pointed out that in that bag, Safe Haven Baby Box didn't want the ODJFS voluntary surrender medical form. There's a form, anonymous voluntary medical form, where a woman, if you could get her to fill out, she'd check off like heart disease history, da-da-da-da-da. That's now in the boxes because of me. After my township tried to get Dave Yost to have an opinion saying that those forms could be eliminated. I'm like, why would you not want that form to be there? But I want you to think about this. When I went there on Saturday and I took the paperwork out of that bag and I point out to people, there was no pen in the bag. So how's the woman supposed to fill the form out? She's supposed to make sure you bring a pen when you're surrendering your baby. I'll throw something else at you. What would happen if there was a pen? She opens the door, puts a baby in, door closes, door's locked, fills out the form. Where do I put it? What do I do with that form? I put a picture online too, and I'd encourage you to go down there, open the door. I didn't open the door because I'm afraid of getting arrested or something. But you open the door, look through it. It's like a lounge behind it, like a bunch of recliners there. That'd be quite a surprise if you're a woman surrendering your baby, open the door, and there's a bunch of people sitting in a lounge room watching you put your baby in a box in a clear bassinet. All of these things, you know, I apologize for going on so long, but I think I told you guys on Saturday, I saw a thing about mass school casualty events. And I thought it was very interesting. Somebody said, you don't see that many mass casualty school events in cities, in inner cities. I'm not talking about Troy. Because those schools are already hardened. They already have metal detectors. They're afraid that something could happen all the time, so they're on top of it. You see them at suburban schools. Why? Because suburban schools go through the motions, do all the training, do the drills, but they never think it's going to happen there, really. So when it does happen, that's where the response gets so screwed up, because they don't know, they never really thought, nobody really thought this was going to happen here, okay? And that's what I'm afraid about with these boxes. Only about 15% of the boxes have ever been used. Have ever been used. And there's some that, for some strange reason, have been used a lot of times. And so my thing is, okay, maybe it's not going to happen. Hopefully it never happens. But we damn well better be sure that the way we've set the boxes up is that if it does happen, it's thought through. It's not just a photo op. It's not just a political opportunity to get some votes. It's not just a virtue signaling statement. These are real people. And I'll tell you what, Mayor, I don't know you, you're a nice person, I'm sure. But in the video at the thing, you said you arranged the event so that I wouldn't be there. The aggressive guy from Cincinnati. You know who else wasn't there? I bet you a lot of young women weren't there. Because a lot of times when we're doing these things, we're not talking to the people we're trying to reach. We're talking to old people. What we need to be doing is talking to young women and young men who have just as much responsibility. And if we get a woman to come forward before the need, get proper prenatal care, proper medical delivery, hopefully the father can be involved too and take the responsibility. I can't imagine, I'm a very clean living individual, and I can't imagine not taking responsibility. And I can't imagine stigmatizing things. And I'm telling you, boxes, there's a place for them. Okay, and typically that place is people that have, and I don't want to get into issues, but serious issues. Mental health issues, drug issues, other issues. Frankly, I'm not sure that boxes really solve that. Every box that's been put in a Safe Haven Baby Box is claimed by Monica Kelsey to have been healthy, which doesn't make any sense. Does not make any sense. If these babies are being born in dorm rooms and cars, that they're coming in healthy into these boxes. So that doesn't make any sense that that's happening. And ultimately, it's going to be on us, did we get to the right audience? Or do we just feel good? Did we spend $10,000 and think, problem gone? And I tell you what, in Troy, Ohio, I don't think where I live, if somebody asked me, do I think the box is ever going to get used? I would say, Not in my lifetime, but it could. And if it does, if we've made the commitment as a government to have it, you better darn well make sure it's thought through, that it complies with the code, and that you don't demonize the Department of Health. By the way, the Department of Health is bureaucratic. I have no real connection there. They are what they are. They're a government agency. But they don't deserve to be demonized because of a form you guys submitted. So I appreciate, I understand you saying, Mr. Lutz, you're not going to talk about this. I think it'd be good to talk about it. I appreciated the free and frank discussion on Saturday. And I'd be glad to take any questions. And I don't know if that counts as talking about it, but is there any questions for me about anything I've talked about or presented?
Considering this is still under investigation, we would be advised not to engage in any dialogue, but we do appreciate your comments.
So now I just want to close with this. I appreciate that. But I've seen the dialogue from the city of Troy in the media. So you're standing right here, you're sitting right there, I'm sitting here, and I appreciate that. You're making the wise choice. But how did this already get in the media with people claiming ODH did something wrong? When frankly, I'm not pointing the finger at anybody here, including the chief. But the first step to fixing this is admitting, yeah, we did something wrong. From the meeting I had with the councilman at your Ask a Councilman, it was my opinion that probably you guys weren't fully apprised of even what was going on. Where the money was come from, who reviewed the contract, what did the contract actually say, and it's a pretty serious thing. It's to me like school boards. School boards are real serious things because they have an effect on the future of our society more than this group does. And so I appreciate that you can't ask questions, you can't make comments, but I'm here tonight because, not because I went to the media, you guys went to the media. Probably because Monica Kelsey pressed you into going to the media. Because she's trying to bully code changes in Ohio with low information that are not in the best interest. They're in the best interest of her making millions of dollars selling $10,000 boxes. They're not in the best interest of Ohio, and they're not in the best interest of women in Ohio. So I appreciate you letting me talk for so long. I appreciate your attentiveness just based on your visual expressions, and I truly appreciate the beautiful town that Troy is, and that you care. You know, even people that might disagree with me on things, or might have, I'd like to think that people that disagree with me or thought I was a bad guy will now realize I'm not a bad guy. I'm trying to help solve the problem, not just for Troy, but for Ohio. Because I think it is just morally and ethically wrong that we would let some company come in here and bully us in Ohio to something that benefits them financially, not necessarily Ohio women. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. If there's anyone else that wishes to address council, please come to the podium, give your name and address, and take as much time as you wish to consume.
Bradley Barron, Crestwood Drive. I'm going to tell you something. I like the last speaker, I'm very pro-life as well. But I'm going to also say this. I would much rather have a baby placed in a box than than placed in a trash can, or better yet, murdered. You want to talk about Skylar Richardson, that's the most recent one. I can think about one back about 20 years ago down in Washington Township, Ohio. How many of you remember the Rebecca Hopfer case? That was a big one in Montgomery County. This woman murdered her child. Now, I will agree with Mr. Hicks on one thing. We do need, if the safe haven law has been in existence for 20 years, like he claims that it has been, and I don't know that it has or it hasn't, I do think we need to educate more. But to say that a baby should not be placed in a box, to me, is ludicrous. I speak from experience. I was born in an era when the only thing a young mother could do was to be shuffled off to an unwed mother's home. I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio. My mother, as far as I know, was in an unwed mother's home in Cincinnati. So yes, I do think I speak a little bit from experience. I don't know what Mr. Hicks's experience is, but I speak from that experience. I thank my lucky stars every day I was adopted. Because I could have been stillborn, murdered, left for dead in a trash can, or my mother could have kept me. Very well, she could have kept me. I'll give you that. But she made a wise choice for a young girl of 16. She gave me up, and I'm here today because of that. And I know you can't, I'm just speaking rhetorically here because I know you can't speak because of the ongoing investigation. I respect that. But the only question I have is if there was such a problem with this, When the ODA, when this was installed, why didn't the ODH come forward then? If there was such a problem with it. If there was a problem with its installation, the ODH should have been there at the beginning saying, you need to change this. But what we have here is somebody that is, to me, going around and stirring up trouble. Stirring up trouble. And that, to me, is just plain wrong. I applaud the baby box, I really do, because I think it is, I pray that it never has to be used. I pray that it never has to be used, because we have too many unplanned pregnancies in this world today as it is. But I just pray that it never has to be used. But the fact is, it's here, we have it, and I thank God that we do. Because I don't want to see a baby in Troy dying because it's born somewhere out in the cold or whatever. So I thank you for at least hearing me out on this. And that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barrier. Anyone else wish to come forward? Please give your name and address and take as much time as you wish to consume.
Chris Dahm, 1140 Hillcrest Drive. I am a resident here, a pastor of a church in this community, and this particular topic is one that is very, very dear to my heart. And the fact of the matter is, you do have the authority to walk this through. I hear what the gentleman was saying. A lot of what he was giving us was wise counsel and how we go forward. But what I do understand is this: 22,000 babies are surrendered in hospitals every year. We know that. But we also know that there are babies that are not surrendered on a regular basis. In pre-safe haven, they were discarded. Dumpster, backyards. And what we do understand is from the point of safe haven forward, 3 to 4 times more babies have been saved than have been discarded beyond the hospitals because of these opportunities. Yes, they need to be educated. Sure, they need to come forward, but in desperate times, people do desperate things. They're not going to get educated. They want the problem to go away. And we have to give them the ability to make that choice in that moment, in that desperate moment. We need to do our due diligence and make sure that everything is in line, ready to receive, ready to respond. But we also need to understand that it's not just a stereotypical thing of, well, it's the low income or it's this community or that culture. I lived in Indiana for a while. In Concord, Indiana, much more wealthy than Troy, Ohio. And just recently, one fire department received 3 babies in 2 months. So it could happen here. And we need to be ready to respond. Is there a technical thing that is going on here? Yeah, I read the reports. Understand what the health department's doing. Understand what a concerned citizen threw out there to cause trouble. That's my opinion. And I'm allowed to have that opinion. I believe that our chief, our council, every one of us had everything in order in our hearts and our minds to say we want to provide for our community, provide for these desperate moments. And now we have an individuals trying to derail this on a technicality. I think we need to really think about this and understand what is at stake here. Because as a community, we want leadership. We want a mayor. We want a council that's going to listen to the voice of our people in Troy, Ohio. And I hear the voice of our people as a pastor. And we want to make sure that we take care of life and take care of those that are desperate in that season of life. Yes, we would love them to come forward, love the opportunity to counsel. That opportunity is not always there. And that's why we have to make sure that we give them this, that we push as hard as we can as a council, as a community to say, this needs to happen. Did it come at a cost? Sure. Is somebody making money off of it? Probably. But yet we have the ability. It's in place, and we need to go forward. And if it's about fundraising, it'll happen, because we have a great community with a great heart to make sure that we take care of each other, those that are desperate. And I want to make sure that we have that voice, that these children have every opportunity to have a chance at changing the world, just like we do. And we need to give that to them. They deserve that. And that's what I want us to hear today. So I appreciate the time, and I appreciate your hearts. And I know that you'll do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor. Anyone else wish to address council? Again, please come to the podium, give your name and address, take as much time as you wish to consume.
Hi, my name is Tracy Trim. I live at 119 West Market Street in West Milton, but I go to church in Troy, and I have volunteered at Miami County Right to Life here in Troy for the past 16 and a half years. And I started volunteering there after the birth of my first son, who we adopted at birth. When you walk out of a hospital with somebody else's baby, it gives you a new perspective. And as soon as we got home, I thought, I have to do something to help these moms not have to make this choice to give their baby away or anything else. So that's when I found Miami County Right to Life, and it meets a physical need for moms up through toddlerhood. And through this time, I have found that the goal of churches and organizations that are there to help mothers is not to, get them to put their babies up for adoption or anything like that. It's to help these moms to understand they can be a mom, that they can take care of their children, that the world will come alongside them in order to do that. And nobody enters a pregnancy intending to place her baby into a baby box. It's a last resort. And taking away that option for a mother to ensure her baby is safe only hurts both the mother and her baby. And I encourage everyone here, everyone in the community, whoever's listening, to find a way that you can come alongside these mothers and babies who are created in God's image so that they aren't alone and that this box will never have to be used. And I also encourage this council to fight to keep this option, however, I don't know what role you have in this, but so that we can help these women that we are not able to reach. And if you need pens, I am willing to provide the pens. So I guess that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to address council? Please come to the podium, give your name and address, and take as much time as you wish to consume.
Good evening. My name is Josh Blue. I live at 1520 Brookfield Lane in Troy, Ohio. My wife and my family moved here a year and a half ago, and we are honored to be able to call Troy, Ohio our home. It has been such a welcoming, wonderful community to be a part of. I listened carefully to what Mr. Hicks outlined, and I want to run through the arguments he gave and show that those arguments do not have merit to what is being considered with these boxes. First, he ran through the history of Safe Haven. That has no merit on what we do. If we choose to value life, that is our choice. Second, he ran through the fact that there is a company who makes money from making baby boxes, from making these drop boxes. Whether we purchase a drop box from the company or build it ourselves, that doesn't affect how we value life. The fact that a company is making money, if we didn't do it through that company, we would pay a contractor. That contractor makes money. If we didn't do it through that contractor, if we found another company, they're making money. The people they employ, they make money. The argument that we should avoid it because that company makes money off of selling these boxes is irrelevant to the decision we make. He talked about the stigma of dropping off a baby because he mentioned cameras. We all know this building has cameras all around it. The police stations have cameras all around it. The hospital has cameras all around it. Most public buildings have cameras that cover all sides of the building. So there isn't a building where you wouldn't go in and have to cross in front of a camera. The fact that there's a camera doesn't alleviate the stigma. And the fact that there is a stigma doesn't change what we do. We are not trying to increase the stigma. We'd like to decrease the stigma associated with adoption. But the fact that some people have that stigma, we're trying to meet every person in the place they are. He talked about signage. Absolutely. Let's put up more signage. But that doesn't change what we do with the baby box. We can do both. Why not do both? He talked about anonymity, and that relates to cameras. There are cameras all over the place. Many people don't even realize Ring Central, the cameras you put on your door. Amazon has the right to sell those cameras. They have sold the footage to Ring Central cameras to foreign entities. So your camera that you have mounted on your doorbell at your house, there are foreign entities that buy the right to view your camera. He talked about forms. If there are problems with the forms, and this will go to a couple other things, he talked about the code, the forms in the code. If there are problems in my work, let's improve them. Let's not discard the idea because there are problems. Let's fix the problems to make this better. By all means, let's take his advice. He talked about they should be in hospitals. Absolutely. Let's put them in the hospitals too. Let's put them more places, not decrease the access to them. Let's increase the access to them. He talked about boxes are for mental illness, for women who have mental illness. That would only seem to increase the stigmatism associated with the boxes. He talked earlier about trying to decrease the stigmatism associated with the boxes, but referring to them as for women with mental illness would seem to increase that stigmatization. So I would say, absolutely not. Just because women are putting the children in the box, we don't know the reason, and we cannot presume that they are putting the child in the box because of mental illness. My wife served overseas at a ministry called Door of Hope, where they received babies who were placed in boxes like this, and they made sure those babies got adopted. I am the father of 2 wonderful daughters who were placed for adoption, and I love them with all my heart. I would close by just saying, we can improve what we do, we can increase signage, we can put boxes in other locations, and we can make the boxes that we have better, and we should value every life. And this is just another option to continue to value life. I appreciate that Mr. Hicks values life. Let's make sure that we have a full and robust way of valuing every child's life. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to address council this evening? Please come forward, give your name and address.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Brookhart. I'm actually a resident of Bethel Township. My kids do go to preschool here in Troy. And I appreciate your time for letting us.
Can we have your address, please?
I'm sorry, 7405 Pisgah Road. Yes, in Bethel Township.
That's
It's
Tip City?
a Tip City address, correct, yes. I appreciate your time. I know that this is an exhausting topic, but for a lot of people, it is also a very emotional topic. I come from, I thankfully can say not experience, of having the feeling of not knowing what to do with my child. This one that is speaking to you with me, she's number 3. And thankfully I've had that support system where I wasn't put in a position where I didn't know what to do with my child. I also come from unique perspectives of being a firefighter paramedic for the last 12 years, and I am also adopted. So there's a lot of avenues for this for me that really touch home. I want to make sure everyone knows that Mr. Hicks has some incredibly valid reasons to be addressing every location that has a baby box, especially on the anonymity side of things. Again, I've never been in the position to feel that to be a need, but if you can think of one of the most desperate times of your life and how you probably didn't want a single soul to know where you were in that position, in that moment, and then you have to go to somewhere where, okay, now this person's going to ask me 20 questions. Now there's, again, I understand the reasoning for cameras, but now there's a camera watching me. I have to walk into a building. So a mom who is ready to say, okay, I know I can't care for this child. I can't give it the life that it deserves. Now that she has this many more barriers to cross before she can actually get to that position where she gives that child the life that it deserves. I do want to say thank you to the council and to Troy Fire Department for even having this happen in the first place, having the baby boxes here. I don't think that anyone would argue that it is a program that is necessary. Whether it is something that never gets used, whether it is a unfortunate marketing scheme from a company. And again, I am not in their position either. I believe that everyone does have some, if not all, well-intentioned aspects of these baby boxes. I want to make sure that people understand that if we're going to do these types of things, that we need to be talking to the people that is going to be affecting. You talk to the moms who have had to give their children up for adoption. You talk to the families that didn't have another choice, but to use that kind of resource for themselves. And again, working with the people who bring up the issues with these types of things. I mean, nobody likes to be called out. Nobody does. But if that were the case and we just shut everybody out who says, hey, there's a problem with this, there's a problem with this, we would never get to the best result for these women and for these babies. And ultimately, that's what the goal should be, is how can we make this as easy as possible to save those children's lives. So while I don't agree with some aspects on both sides of the table, I do agree with there needs to be baby boxes. There are avenues within city government that do require some purchases of significant size to be bid on. See if there's other companies out there that will be willing to make this or do make this. Go through the process the way that it's supposed to be. I don't think that the baby boxes need to be stopped. I don't think that we need to say, hey, because there's issues, let's shut it down. I think we say, hey, let's start talking about all of the things that need to be changed. Let's start making better laws to make this easier. Let's start talking to Ohio Department of Health, having collaborative meetings, making boards of education for these types of things. So that way we make sure that we can move forward in a positive direction instead of just saying, hey, let's shut them down. Let's just scratch the whole thing. I've heard of these boxes as being called headaches or as a nuisance or things that somebody else has to deal with. Well, I can promise you that those moms of those babies and those babies would hope and pray that you would be willing to take that next step of having that headache. And I'm 100% also in agreement that as a city, as a community, as Miami County, as the state of Ohio, that we do need to do better at the education. Until I became a firefighter paramedic, I didn't know anything about safe haven laws. I didn't know anything about all of the resources. And I know that there's women that I graduated high school with who had 2 children by the time they graduated. And thank God we lived in a community that supported them instead of them feeling like that would have been the only option. So I think as a community, we do need to do better at making sure that we move forward in a positive direction. That we say, this is something we don't want to see go away. We're going to fight tooth and nail to make sure that we can keep this resource. How do we make it better? How do we make it easier for the moms? How do we make it easier for the fire departments, for the police stations? How do we write better laws to make this easy for everyone involved? And it's everything that's new, everything that is worth it, always is hard and is always going to have both ends of the table fighting each other. But I hope and pray that you all can keep the baby boxes open and work with the Ohio Department of Health and work with the people on both sides of the table to say, we see both sides. We see you. Let's make it work. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to address council this evening?
My name is Dale Christian, and I live at 1375 Farnham Road here in Troy, pastor at First Baptist Church. And when I heard about the baby box, I was thrilled. And I have been involved in speaking for pro-life issues for some time. It's been a concern of mine as a pastor believing in life and the preservation of life and eternal life. And Proverbs 31:8-9 says, "Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute. Open your mouth, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and needy." And when I heard about the opportunity that we have here in Troy to have a baby box, it just gripped my heart. And I appreciate Mr. Hicks expressing his concerns. And I think some of those things are things that ought to be taken into consideration to provide the best possible resource for a young mother who is destitute or who desperate and needs something to meet the needs of that child that she's willing to preserve the life of. And when I went to the dedication and saw the quality of that environment, I was brought to tears just to know that that child at that moment, when that mom is desperate, that child is going to be well taken care of. And I thank those who took the steps to bring this to fruition. Are there some things that might need to be addressed? Most probably. I've been involved in situations where you make decisions and then you make adjustments to those decisions as you go. But I commend those who have brought this to fruition. I commend Chief Simmons and his efforts in bringing this about. And one of the things that impressed me were the safeguards that are in place. And knowing that baby's going to be in a climate-controlled environment, 911 is going to be notified right away, and someone will give attention to that child within seconds, if not within minutes, if not seconds. And so thank you for the opportunity to speak to this matter. And I just want to know that I, and as a church, we will be praying that this will be used in such a way to preserve life. And so again, thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Pastor. Anyone else wish to address council tonight?
Hello, my name is Jennifer Myers. I live at 2265 South Greenlee Road here in Troy. And pretty much everyone, the last 5 people, have summed up everything that I wanted to express today, so I won't repeat what they have said. I just want to thank you for bringing, and for Chief Simmons for bringing the baby box to Troy. I am a product of 2 teenagers, unplanned pregnancy, and they had amazing support. I've also volunteered in programs here in Troy where women do not have that support, and they have had to make desperate decisions that affect their babies, and they don't have hope. And I know that these boxes, just having the box here and having that safe option is giving women hope. And so the desperate that they feel kind of has a light at the end of the tunnel for them, and that they can give their baby a better chance than what they could provide for them themselves. So again, I just want to thank our community, and you have my family's and my own support to continue the fight to keep our baby box. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to address council this evening? Last call. We'll adjourn tonight's meeting. Thank you all for coming here this evening. Our next meeting will be Monday, October 3rd, 2022 at 7 p.m. right here in council chambers. Have a safe ride home, everybody.